Lending Era, the podcast where we dive into the world of residential, business and commercial finance, bringing you expert insight, tips and strategies to help you navigate the intricate landscape of lending in Australia. I'm one of your hosts, Jessica, and in today's episode we're changing things up a little bit and we have a fresh face. Actually, it's a fresh voice because this is a podcast audio format, and we're going to be chatting all things auctions. So here with me today we have a very familiar voice. First up with David Thomas.
Hey Jess, how are you?
I'm good, Dave. How are you?
Yeah, good. Excited about this week's episode.
Yeah, I think it's relevant for your life at the moment.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time talking about this on the podcast and hence why we were keen to have this person to come along to share some insight.
Yeah, it's definitely a good one here. So if you're listening, make sure that you pay attention. So seated just to my right here, I have an award-winning auctioneer and overall smooth operator. Having recently taken out industry accolades to the tune of People's Choice Auctioneer of the Year 2023, Auctioneer of the Year 2022 finalist, and Novice Auctioneer of the Year in 2021, I have James Scott.
G'day guys, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, so welcome. So we spend a lot of time on the podcast talking about people getting ready for auction, people ready to, buy a house, attend a property. So it's good to have someone from the other side of the fence to kind of just,
show the gavel.
Yeah, show what happens on the other side of the gavel. And then, get some tips and tricks and hopefully it'll help our listeners and clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kick off and just do a little bit of a Q&A, getting to know you style moment. How did you first get into the property market?
Oh, well, I think like most agents in the industry, I fell into the property market. Wasn't expecting it at all. Finished uni with a degree in government and international relations, moved back to Canberra and about 8 weeks in went, not what I wanted. So, all life plans went up in the air. So I jumped on a plane to the UK and started playing rugby over there and met some guys in the pub. And 4 years later, I was heading up a team in residential real estate in London and came back to Canberra just before COVID, which was a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
And then entered into the sales market, and it's a job I absolutely love and I'm very passionate about.
Yeah. And now we see you a lot, especially, given the accolades I've mentioned, on the auctioneer side of the fence. Is there a reason you've leaned towards the auctioneering kind of role in the real estate industry more?
I wish I had a better answer, but really it was I just thought it'd be a bit of fun. I went to a lot of auctions, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners would have, and look, I've seen some phenomenal auctioneers. Canberra's blessed to have a number of national accredited auctioneers, and so they also saw some ones where I left a bit confused and almost a bit intimidated. So I thought my approach to sales is very personalised rather than transactional, and I thought I think I could give that a pretty good go, and I just like to have fun with it. So
yeah. I think having a good auctioneer on the day will make all of the difference because we've all, as you've touched on, we've all been to an auction where we've left feeling like no one was driving the car and it definitely didn't reach a destination. Whereas having kind of an upbeat attitude and making sure that everyone is there for an experience rather than a transaction, it does translate to a sale.
Well, it's always just important to remember that both sellers and buyers are highly emotional and highly anxious. So, my job is not just to count the numbers and get the best bids out of people. It's actually just to reassure them, calm them, and get them feeling confident that they're actually there to do what they came for in the morning. Because the second you get wrapped up in all the bids and all the hullabaloo, you can get a bit lost and forget why you're actually there.
So is it important to, I guess, read the room and kind of pace the auction to suit the people that are there on the day?
Oh, absolutely. Every auction is completely different. It's based on the type of property and the buyers that property is attracting. A smaller, say, 2-3 bedroom home is going to get a lot more first home buyers that not only haven't been to an auction but haven't really bought a house before. So they've got a whole new level of nerves compared to someone probably like yourself, David, who's been in the market a while and knows what to expect and has probably got some strategies in the back of their mind that they can actually rely on, because it's all well and good having something in mind, but until you get there on the day, it all goes out the window pretty quick. So my job, some auctions I'll take my time. I love throwing a few jokes or stories in, and it's not to bring the attention of myself, it's just to take the attention off them. And get the neighbours and everything sort of giggling around, get them involved, and it gives the buyers that moment to take a breath and come back to focus.
Yeah, because it's not a race. The house doesn't need to be sold in 5 minutes.
Well, I had one on Friday night and only one bidder, and it was an hour-long auction.
Oh, my goodness.
And that was it was a 3-bedroom townhouse out in Watson, which I called for Called It, so Canberra's new auction house in Canberra. First-home buyers, very nervous. I was like, take our time. So we had a chat, playing with the cat. Leona's cat ran out and caused a scene. But at the end of the day, it was from the opening bid till I think for the gavel, it was just under an hour, just with one bidder going back and forth.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's definitely, and that in that scenario, it does take the charisma to kind of pull it off. Because if you don't have that people-facing brand, that could be a very long process for the buyer in particular. Standing there having to kind of hear all of this going on, and you're like, oh, please just let this end. I just want the house.
Absolutely. But it's all good fun at the end of the day, and every single time at the fall of the gavel, everyone cheers. The buyers are always ecstatic. It's just getting them over that edge, and once they pop in the champagne, they know they've made the right decision.
There's no regrets once that's done.
Exactly.
Now, why have auctions kind of transitioned into being the most popular sales method of late, would you say?
Well, so Canberra's always been pretty heavy on the auction front, one of the most popular major cities in Australia, but typically from the start of COVID really is when we really saw them come into popularity. And the reason being is, interest rates as low as they were, cash was basically free. And then there was this whole move for people to want to put their money into the property market. And it's competition that pushes house prices up. It's not the agent. I love to think I'm a good negotiator, but I'm only as good as the people I've got coming to the table, and the more people I get to the table, the better the price is going to be. So during that COVID period, we had a lot of competition. And so the most open and fair way to find the value of a house was to put them all together and actually do a public auction.
Let them determine it.
Exactly.
Yep. And we saw during that COVID period that the auction process, we would get two types of buyers. We would get a type of buyer that had missed out on a property at auction and that they were still ready. And they would just fall into another property, right? So over that period of time, I actually saw some auction campaigns as short as 3 weeks, which was because all you needed to do was put the property up and there'd be buyers already in the market, and those buyers would compete for that property.
Absolutely. And I typically run a 3 or 4 week auction campaign, but you're absolutely right. We look like superstars in 21, 22 because you could put anything on the market with photos from your phone and you get 20 registered bidders. Yeah. It's not that way anymore, which is probably a good thing if I'm honest. But it was fair then, and it's still fair now because it's the same process. People aren't sure, are they overpaying? Is it still inflated by what happened before? Where's the market sitting now? And if you can get two bidders together and they're going, well, we both feel it's worth this, and then they're bidding against themselves to get it there, that's going to be a fair reflection of market value.
Yeah. And it's another reflection. We sometimes get clients go, well, what if I pay too much on auction day? And I say, well, in my 15 years of doing this, what the bank valuer will determine is what the true price of that property is, or what the true value of that property is. And if two people with a licensed real estate agent are prepared to stand on the front lawn and one person thinks it's worth 900 and you think it's worth 905 and you buy it for 905, well, that is the market.
Absolutely.
Right? So we rarely ever see an issue where the bank hasn't agreed with the contract price at auction.
And that was another big point actually that I failed to mention there during COVID, why I pushed most of my clients to auction. One, it's fair and open, but as you just said, getting the valuations in. The bank doesn't move as quick as the market does because they're looking at past results. So if you've got that bidder's record and it was shown the competition is what got that eventual price, then the bank will come in as that.
Yeah.
And that certainly does help because I know the only valuations that we saw come in short of purchasing price were the private negotiations because, like you said, there wasn't that record of people that were actually inquiring and making offers. They just simply chose the highest and said, Bob's your uncle.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And it makes it, for a buyer and also a seller, it's a really transparent process.
Yep.
People are going to stand on the front lawn and all say what they think it's worth.
Absolutely.
And then, we'll find who is the highest bidder, what is the most someone's prepared to pay, and there you go. There's your number.
Yeah.
So
like
it's
I said, transparency.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Now, we're going to talk kind of at two sides of a coin here. Now, you don't have to give away all of your secrets. We know that, there's got to be a competitive edge. It is real estate. But how would you best prepare a seller and then on the other side of the coin, a buyer for auction day itself?
We're starting with the seller. It's just important to understand that auctions are just a tool in a real estate agent's bag. And if it doesn't sell on the day, that's not a failure. It's just the next step on that sales process. So my advice to them is breathe. We would have had 3 weeks leading up or 4 weeks, depending on the length of the campaign, where we're working with buyers. We'll have a fair indication of what they're sort of thinking. And then hopefully on the day we've got those buyers ready to go and they're getting to a price where we're happy to release the property. But if not, then we move to the next stage. So it's just settling those nerves again. I think a lot of sellers will be, well, if it doesn't sell at auction, we're doomed. We're never going to sell it. So, no, I've passed properties in, and typically actually a big thing we're getting at the moment is some people aren't ready to register on the day. They haven't got their finance in order, so they'll come to the auction, not bid, hoping it passes in, and then come Monday when we put up for a private treaty, I'll get an offer come in via email. Wish it was every time. It's not every time, but more often than not,
you'd think.
it's typically getting a lot of conditional offers coming through. So that's what I'd be saying to the sellers, and also that they're in full control. They can withdraw the property from sale at any point before the fall of the hammer. So even if I call it on the market and people are already celebrating, thinking the keys are in the hand, if the seller runs out and goes, "No, change my mind," they have full control to do that in the terms and regulations of auction conditions in the ACT. So it's just important to give that power a little bit back to them and say, "Look, you're still in control. I'm not going to sell it without your nod of approval." And even if I've got a written letter saying we'll sell anything over this, I'll always go back and just double check. Going, yeah, 100% certain, cool. So once they feel that they know they've got that power again, and that they're not just throwing it to the market and going to sell for whatever they bidders throw out, then they tend to calm down a little bit.
Yeah.
And clients, I'll jump in here, clients sometimes say, "Oh, look, David, we're going to sell X property." And I've talked to a couple of agents and, one agent's saying auction and I'm not sure about it and blah, blah, blah. One thing that I do make sellers really aware of when I chat to them is the best contract you can have to sell your property is an auction contract, right? It's unconditional, signed on the day of the auction, your house is sold, the buyer cannot, renege. That is the best sale contract you can have, right?
Absolutely.
And you're going to get it in 3 or 4 weeks. So go down that process. And if that process doesn't, as James said, sometimes properties don't sell at auction, but, if it goes down that path and it doesn't sell on auction day, then it becomes a normal listing. Yeah. So why not have 2 bites at the cherry,
And then the other advantage of that as well is if you're not, especially with a unique home, where you made some modifications and there's not really any comparables that have sold in recent months, so you don't really know where it sits. It's in this range, but if you give buyers a big range, they're always going to lean towards the lower end, and fair enough, fair play to them. But an auction campaign gives you a chance to sort of market a property with a very vague range, saying that we're going to take it to auction, the market will decide, but you can get all that feedback. But if it passes in, when you put it on the market for a price, you know where to price it.
Yeah.
So even if it doesn't sell, it's still a great bonus to the seller to actually have that information they didn't have before going to market, so they can price their home according to the market and get a fair outcome.
Because over that 4 weeks, I'm assuming you as an agent would be talking to all the prospective buyers, saying, what do you think it's worth? Where do you sit in the market?
Absolutely.
What other comparable sales do you think they're there? So you'd be able to feed that data back to the seller.
And that's probably been the biggest shift since COVID, and then the market sort of coming back to normal is, as I mentioned, we looked like superstars before because we could just put an auction day and we're going to get bidders. 100% guaranteed you'll get bidders. It's not guaranteed anymore. So now it's back to actually doing the work that that we're hired to do. So on a 3 or 4 week campaign, I'm meeting every registered bidder that comes out at least 3 to 5 times, doing private inspections, open homes. I know exactly where every one of those bidders is going to be, what their limits are, what their situation is, so that come auction day I can actually talk to them as a person. And we're still doing that open public forum, but it's a lot more negotiating and being personal with the buyer rather than just expecting them to rock up and throw all their money to me. So. To the property. So that's probably been the biggest shift in just attitude, but it still works. So you can't just run an auction campaign by booking an auction date. It's the lead up to that campaign that is just as important. The same way it would be if you had it for a price. You're not just going to put a price up and go, oh, someone will just come and offer it. You've got to take people through and get them to fall in love with the property and see the value there. And if they don't see the value, they're not going to see the same value the seller has.
And I think sometimes the auction date is nice because it's a goal to work towards. When there is a price on a property, I know that generally our clients in particular will think, oh, we've got some time to act on this. We won't even go to an open home this weekend. We'll go to the winery instead. And then that property sells that weekend and your dreams are kind of crushed. So I do like that area to do with an auction, as well as you're all working towards the same date. As long as you're a registered bidder, if there's a pre-auction offer, you're always going to find out anywho. And then it does put you at that fair advantage. Everyone's got the same chance of purchasing a property on the day. It's just simply that some people do have a higher limit, but the other buyers don't know yours and you don't know theirs.
Exactly right.
But you just mentioned there, Jess, pre-auction offers. And for our clients that are on the selling side of things, pre-auction offer, once again, that pre-auction offer is under auction conditions with a clause in there that says that the buyer can't renege. If you can get a pre-auction offer on a property and it's a fair and reasonable price and you're happy to accept it, once again, that's a great sale for a seller.
Absolutely.
And I think the pre-auction offers that is where you do get the kind of experience in using a reputable agent to list your property. That is where you would kind of see the benefits there. If they've got a large database that, as you were saying, you collect all of that data for the prospective buyers. That doesn't just get thrown away every time you've sold a property. That is kind of mined to find a property for someone else, almost in like a buyer's agent kind of role where you're introducing people to them.
Yeah, and in this market, that's what you've got to be. You've got to have those relationships. And again, there are some amazing agents in Canberra, and you'll watch a lot of the sales they'll do. You won't actually see because they would have sold something, got a phone call from someone who had a property similar, and they'll say, "Look, I'll call some of the other buyers that came through." In the last 3 weeks, I've sold 3 off market. Just because people call saying, "I saw you sold that one. This guy just missed out. Go see this. These guys weren't ready at the time." That's perfect because we're getting good results for clients. They're not having to invest in the marketing. It doesn't always work out that way. But if you're not having those initial conversations with the buyers, you don't know what they're looking for. It's not even possible to do down the line. So,
and I mean, that would be so much less anxiety for the buyer in that scenario because they're competing against a smaller pool of people in a non-public facing platform.
Yeah.
Well, and I had an auction on Saturday actually in Cook, massive 5-bedroom home, and again, buyer, it was their first auction, and this was something I did a bit differently. They weren't comfortable bidding in the open. We had the one registered bidder, so I said, well, what we'll do, why don't you guys head inside? I'll get the agent to run out your bids to me, and you can. You can bid in sort of the comfort of a quiet and what's the word I'm looking for? Just taken away a bit. Yeah. So I was still out there with the neighbours and other bidders, and again trying to tell some terrible jokes. And I actually got an "oh dear" from an old lady that came across, which is for me is a win. So I was happy with that. And that they were bidding more. They felt more confident bidding when they didn't have the whole neighbourhood's eyes on them. And fair enough. And they had the 3 young kids with them, and they were a bit intimidated as well. So
I can imagine.
As long as you're registered, you're at the property. You know what you're bidding. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, there's always ways around it. So it's understanding what they want. I reckon if we hadn't had that conversation, and credit to the agent actually that highlighted that, I don't think we would have got a bid because they were really
anxious about
the situation. So you have to adapt. As I said at the start, every auction is going to be different, and you just got to learn to adapt.
And on the buyer preparation front, so you would say that the key to success that you've seen is certainly just having those clear, open communication kind of moments with those clients that are prospective buyers.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing for buyers is firstly, know your limit. Yeah. Sit down, know your limit, and don't go over it. Yeah. Because as David said, once you sign the contract, you're committed to buy it, and the last thing you want to do is get to the settlement date and realise that you don't actually have the funds to purchase the property. So know your limit.
Far too much.
You don't always have to tell it to the agent. In fact, if I was working for the buyer, I'd probably say, don't tell the agent your limit because they're going to come and go, I know you have this. But once you have that limit in your mind, that's it. Leave it there. You're not going to go past it, but there's lots of strategies out there. Do you bid first? Do you wait till the end? Do what you feel comfortable with. Do what you've decided prior with who you're buying with or your family or the agent that might be coming with you to help you out. And probably a good trick that I see that throws a lot of other buyers is people will bid strongly at the start. They'll go up in 50s or 100. And when they get close to that limit, they'll start slowing down. They go 5, 1, 2... Keep going up in big increments until no one else knows your limit. Yeah. And the best advice for another buyer again actually is you're not bidding against the auctioneer, you're bidding against the other buyers.
Yes.
So I have a lot of people throw me crazy numbers trying to trip me up. And I was like, I can do the numbers, mate. And if I don't, I'll just get my phone out and type them out. I've got control of that, but you're not throwing me. You're trying to throw them. Yeah. So I think the best auction I ever did was this woman was going up in 50s. Someone bid and she bid 50, and then she looked at the other buyer and went, actually, 100, and just stared him down, and the guy left, and I was going, she just outbid herself, but we didn't know what her limit was. She might have had another 100 to play with, but she absolutely psyched the other buyer out. I'm going, that had nothing to do with me. That was just a strong tactic.
I like it.
Yeah. I was going to say, we've certainly seen that, particularly one of our colleagues, when they purchased a property, it got to the point where it was going up in 1s and 2s, 20. And quickly, the others were 1s and 2s one more time, but another 20. And it's just, just jumping in when you're appropriately ready to. Because there's no point sometimes bidding the whole time and being the clear person, because then again, you start to almost compete against yourself because you're getting that internal anxiety that I have just made 6 bids and I'm not going to get this thing. Like, I've got to get this bloody thing now.
And that's getting caught up in the emotion. And look, that's part of my job, is taking people from that rational, logical bidder to emotional, to get them to, but not to cheat them and get them to a point where they're not comfortable, but to get them to that limit that they know they've set and they're comfortable with. And if they can't go over that, absolutely fair enough. Thanks so much for coming along. But yeah, again, it's no one else knows your limit. So bid against the other buyers and bid confidently. Another thing I always recommend to my buyers is stand front and centre. Be in the middle of the driveway in front of the auctioneer, and you're looking at him, and have all the buyers looking at you going, God, that guy's keen. He's not walking away without this property. Is it even worth us bidding?
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of auctions won by people just that are front and centre, put their hand up nice and high when they're placing a bid. They're loud, as opposed to some other bidders who, again, might not have been through that process before, and they're sort of in the corners behind a bush, and they're like, oh my God, another one. And that buyer's just looking at them going, I've got you. I'll get you in the next 2 bids. So
I've had these usually on a Friday afternoon. Clients ring me and we do this, preparation. You find a bid to this, and this is the purchase price of that, and this is your loan amount, and this is what your payments are going to be, all this kind of stuff. And I usually say to clients, exactly what James said, know what your number is, and I say to the clients, write it down on a piece of paper, put it in your pocket. You never have to think about it ever again if it's written down and it's in your pocket. You're going to stop when you get to that number. That's it, finished. Next thing is have it really clear in your head and be really clear with the auctioneer, be really clear with the process. Trying to work out what you're going to do and form a strategy on the fly is not going to work. You're about to stand on the front lawn with 20 people looking at you. Do you remember doing a speech when you're in year 12, right? And all your peers are looking at you. And you can't remember anything, right? You can barely function. If you've just got a piece of paper written in your pocket and the only thing that's in your head is I just need to go and be very clear with what my limit is and put my hand in the air until I get to that number, then you'll do a great job, right? You will get the property. You will look strong. You will look committed to all the other buyers because you're not going to look one bit nervous because you've only got one thing to do.
Yeah.
Don't try and make up a strategy on the fly. Don't try and, hold out to the end or start early or, adjust all your bids to silly numbers. Just be clear and consistent. If the auctioneer's going up by 10s, go up by 10s. If it's going up by 5s, just go up by 5s.
Or even if they're going up by 10s, offer a 20. Or if they're going up in 20s and you want to offer 10, you have that capacity. The auctioneer can refuse a bid, but they're probably not going to likely to if it's a strong bid. So, and some people, look, it doesn't matter how much you prepare. Some people are just not going to have that confidence to bid, and that's fine. There are other ways. I've bid for my clients before. I'll have them there, and I'll do the bidding. I like to think I know what I'm doing when it comes to auctions, and we've been successful there. And there's no reason why a buyer couldn't call an agent they've got a good relationship. Can you help me on the day? And go that way. So
I've stood next to clients on auction days and helped them.
You have,
So
Dave's definitely been like the backbone every now and then because we've all seen, and as you were saying earlier, if you're not the confident person at the auction, chances are you're probably not going to win that auction. And if you do need someone just to reinforce that confidence for you, you're not going to regret that decision down the line. Absolutely. Chances are you're going to be relieved that someone was able to do that for you.
Yeah, and sometimes we'll have, a husband and wife and the partner's away and on auction day, called away for work or what have you, and I'll just say, look, can you just come with me? I don't want you to do anything. Just come with me. There. I just need someone who's been involved in this whole process just to be next to me on the day. So yeah, it's always fun.
And it's very standard at auctions. I see a lot of agents, and Canberra being the size it is, it's always great. Yeah. It's a great community, the real estate industry. And I'll see a bunch of agents, they'll come say good day and go, I'm helping my client bid today. And fantastic. And either they're there for moral support or they're actually holding the paddle. There are lots of different ways you can approach it. But as David, you highlighted so perfectly, put your limit in your pocket, have a strategy and just stick to it.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, let's wrap it up with one last question here. So, James, what would you always recommend for any of our sellers potentially who are listening if they aren't too sure as to whether or not they should approach an auction or potentially go private treaty?
Again, every property and every client's going to be different. So my number one rule is do what you feel most comfortable with. If you don't feel comfortable with auctions, don't feel the need to have to do it. It's a great tool and one I love doing. So, of course, I always probably lean towards them. But I've got clients that have had terrible experiences in their first home purchase 7 years ago, and they don't want to do it. And I go, absolutely fine. There's a bunch of other methods we can try. So it's not always one or the other's better than the worst. It's which one you feel you're going to do most confidently. And again, getting the most competition is what's going to get you the best price. So however the agent's going to approach that, if you have a good agent that has a good marketing campaign and they can do that with private treaty, you'll get a good price. If you have a good agent that's a good auctioneer and they can run that campaign properly, that's the key, run the campaign properly, then you should get a good price as well. So do what you feel most comfortable with.
Yeah, that's a really good summary, actually, because I think a lot of people during the sale process do feel like they don't have the control. So if you maintain your comfort limits, you know the outcome all of the time.
And I had one in Narrabundah last month, and I was actually very similar. They weren't comfortable with auctions, and so rather than pushing on, can you just talk me through why? And I said, well, you're in full control, and this is what the advantage is, and you get the unconditional contract. And they went, oh, we didn't realise that. Took it to auction, sold on the day, 3-week campaign as well, actually, and they were stoked, and then helped them buy their next property, and they go, well, okay, that was a different experience, and that's. Again, you don't know what someone's been through in the past, so you just have to empathise with that. I felt auction would have been the best on the day because it was a unique home. They'd done a lot of beautiful renovations, so it was really hard to find an exact price. But and once they were comfortable with that process, I was able to run it properly, and we got a great result.
Beautiful.
Lovely.
Okay, well, we might wind this off here now. So, James, can you please tell our listeners how they can find you in line and in person if they're in sunny Canberra?
Online on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn, just James Scott Real Estate, and I should pop up, or on Verve or Called It's websites. You can find me there to either book me for an auction or for the sale of your home, wink, wink.
Yep.
And our office is actually in Braddon on Torrens Street. So if you're ever in Braddon and want to get a coffee and talk anything real estate, I'm always happy to.
Yeah, and I think that the brilliant thing about, our working relationship as well with James is he's happy to genuinely have a coffee catch up. He's not going to take an exclusive agreement to the coffee and ask you to sign it after a 10-minute chat.
And also, James does his Friday dad jokes, which we always watch in the office. There's been some crackers in there, so it's worth following him on LinkedIn and Instagram just to watch the dad jokes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually going to be a dad soon, so I've actually got
a
reason to keep doing.
Congratulations.
That's probably the most common comment I get. Actually, is going, "Are you even a dad?" I was like, "Not yet."
You're like, "I've made it happen though because I needed an excuse."
Yeah, that's the only reason I'm having the kid, really. It's just my social media can make sense now.
Continuity, we love it. Okay, well, thank you to our amazing listeners for joining us this week as we welcomed our very special guest, James, to discuss all things auctions. As we have touched on, if you or someone you know is in the market for either a fantastic sales agent or a well-versed auctioneer, reach out to James. Highly skilled and dynamic, able to work with you to get the outcome that you want, and we would certainly recommend his services any day of the week.
You've summed it up well, Jess.
Beauty. Okay, thank you again, James, for joining us.
Thanks, Jess, David. Thanks so much for having me. It's been fun.
James.
Easy done. Thanks, David, as well for being here. Should say that. See you later, guys.
Bye.